I'm Jessica and I'm Head of Client Services at YLD. And my team partners with our expert leaders and client stakeholders to make sure we deliver successful projects. I'm here today with Luis, who's our Head of Product Design, and we're going to talk about how we manage teams at YLD, specifically on projects that are more product design focused. Hello, Luis.
Hello, Jessica.
So start us off, I guess, from the beginning. When we first start an engagement or we're looking at putting together a team for a new project, what are the specific things you're thinking about when you're building that team?
Great start. What do we think about? I think it's always important to try to understand what is the current situation. So any client that we're joining or any engagements, like what does that current team look like? What skill set do they have, or what skill sets are they lacking? And so how can we make sure that we bring that expertise on board? I think it's also important to understand how they work. There's and culture, because ways of working and culture is actually quite connected. And how do they work? How do they communicate? How do they like to collaborate? And this is probably going to sound really boring, but an org chart, it's like I'm a big fan.
Yeah, you need it. You need to understand where everyone fits and what's going on in the broader picture.
Precisely. And you kind of see who is talking to who, or who isn't talking to who, or who should be talking to who. And kind of also how we can connect people, I think, as well. It's so yeah, if you have understanding of their skill sets, their ways of working, how they collaborate and how they communicate, then that's a good start.
And how do you know that you've got the right team?
I think there's always an element that's like you're always a little bit worried, but I think if you do your groundwork properly, so you have got a good understanding of what you're going into and you know what the objective is, and each organization is quite different, so there is a little bit of legwork that needs to be done. But if you do that properly and you understand the culture and you understand the ways of working, then that will set you off to a good start. I also should give a shout out here to the client partner team as well, because I do think that on most of our engagement, they have actually done a lot of that, trying to kind of suss out what their client is like, and that is extremely helpful. I think it's also important, apart from kind of getting the expertise right, you kind of going to get the soft skills element right as well. You've got to try to understand, is this team going to gel with each other, and are they going to gel with the internal team? As I said, if you do that legwork correctly, I think you're off to a good start. Absolutely.
Yeah, and you mentioned collaboration, and that is so important. I think we all understand that, if we're not collaborating with each other, let alone whether we're collaborating with the client or not, we're never going to be successful.
True.
And you can pull together a team of the most seasoned experts, but if they're not working together, it's not going to work.
I know.
So yeah, can you tell us how do you, or what are your tips and tricks for pulling out the best in a team and making them, or helping them to collaborate?
Encourage good communication. I think most projects and most teams, they obviously have regular check-in points with each other to kind of try to understand what the project is. But I also think it's important to encourage structured check-ins that are maybe away from the project work and kind of focusing more on the team, like how the team health, how's the team doing, how are they communicating, how are they getting on, and creating a space where people can basically just be vocal and express whatever it is, successes, challenges, etc. And if you kind of take the expertise or the skill set side, I think it's very important as well to have good structured design reviews. And I think there are many organizations that have design reviews in place, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they, and this is probably going to sound terrible, but they might not be doing them right. There is improvements to be made, and it's not just about what do you think about this, but it's actually kind of, this is what I'm working on right now. I would quite like some input on it. I'm here for constructive feedback. This is ultimately my goal, what I'm trying to achieve. And I think if you can create a scenario or a setting where you allow that conversation to happen, then that is really, really useful in kind of ensuring that collaboration and that the team gels well together.
I agree. I'm pleased you mentioned team health, and we've done a lot on team health, certainly in the client partner team. And I think with two things, the making sure the team gel, and then that additional layer of the design reviews, the expert reviews, I think are really setting us up well for success. But alas, we work with people and people clash. And I guess in your experience, how do you manage it when you do get those inevitable people clashes?
Yeah, I'm laughing because I've sensed that that's sort of like where this goes. What happens if you clash? Because, I mean, it does happen, but honestly, you can look at it in two ways, and I think that sometimes those clashes, depending on where they come from and how they sort of appear, they can also be an opportunity for great conversations around ideas. But you do need to allow space for people to come together, have those tough conversations, and actually express and say, okay, you have this opinion, you have this opinion, where is this coming from and what is this based on? Especially when you're looking at something like product design, I think it's important that you can't get too tied down is this is my opinion or because I want this. Like, you are very welcome to have a strong opinion, but is this based on research? Is it based on insights? What is this based on? And I think if you can tie it back to, is it based on insights, and how does this relate to the goal that we're having, like the vision, the direction we're traveling? If those things align, then your very strong opinion might actually be a spark for let's have a conversation and see if we can come up with something. But I go back to what I said before, being able to create this space where people can have open, honest conversations and kind of feel like they're being heard. That's, I think, is the best way to deal with, well, yeah, let's call it clashes, but different opinions.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned goal setting, and you mentioned that at the beginning. I think you're so right. The very, very foundation is if everybody's clear on what it is we're trying to achieve, that just helps to resolve those
Absolutely.
so much quicker.
Yeah.
And I guess the team is one thing. We work with many different client stakeholders, maybe across departments, across areas. How do you manage that piece of aligning different client stakeholders to guide them into or towards the right direction for success?
Yeah, I mean, we talk about goals here, right? And that's going back to that. Like, there are many different stakeholders. We work with many different organizations, and I think sometimes what happens is like a stakeholder, a key person, has a very clear mind. In their mind, they're very clear on what the outcome should be or what the goal is. If that hasn't necessarily been communicated correctly, then that can cause friction. And sometimes as well is that, which I'm sure a lot of people find when they work in these scenarios, is that they might already have an idea in their head of what the solution is, and they sort of want to drive it towards that. So it takes it's open communication, trust again, it's always those things, but it's a balancing act, right? Because we are not here, we don't try to tell people what to do, we want to guide them, and we kind of want to usher them towards a certain direction if we see that that's based on insights again or best practices. But I think establishing a good relationship from the beginning with any client, and absolutely client partners again, kind of really helping to setting that communication. And I think what's really great about that is that you have someone like a client partner or someone like myself or head of engineering, if whatever, depending on the project, to kind of deals with those tough conversations, so the team can actually be friends with each other and kind of get on with their work and do what they're supposed to do. So you separate the politics and the work from each other, and then you're kind of focusing on having conversations with stakeholders, and you can actually have a much, I think that, I mean, we're all adults, right? So, and we all here for the same thing. We want success for this product. So then you can have a much more open conversation, separate away from the team. So yeah, I think it's just kind of managing and how you're handling it.
Nice, yeah, I completely agree. So one last question for me, I guess, to summarize everything that we've kind of talked about. What would you say are some of the common challenges that you have faced in your experience when building and managing product design specialist teams?
Wow, challenge. Yeah, there are. They definitely exist.
They
I
do.
mean, we all wish they didn't, but we all know they do. I think from the top of my head, I would probably say one thing is misalignment. We kind of touched on that earlier, but I think if our team and the internal team are not aligned, and maybe they're not aligned with the key stakeholders either, like I think, it's they might be very clear, but if they haven't been communicated correctly and we are not all looking at the same goal or the same objective, then that's challenging. Something that we can absolutely overcome. It just requires a bit of extra communication, and so that's absolutely. The other thing I would say is probably pivoting. I think if you pivot for the right reason, should absolutely do
Yeah,
it.
better than not to.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
There's loads of time where you think like, maybe you should reconsider.
Mm.
So, but when it happens and it's something which is unexpected, then that can throw us off a little bit, especially because, we build a team and we're taking a lot of time to ensure that we have the right experts on board with the right skills and that they're matching the internal team. And if the pivot and then requires something entirely different, then that can be a bit challenging. But I think from our perspective at YLD, I think that's where your the client partner team comes in, because they have such regular conversations with key stakeholders, they often pick up on the vibe that something is happening and we can sort of plan for it in advance. So I think, yeah, absolutely, it's a challenge, but we can definitely work around that. And another thing is also when an internal team, and this happens actually probably a little bit more, is when an internal team isn't always aware about us joining or why we join. That can be quite challenging because it can cause friction between their team and our team, and our team being seen as someone's coming and telling me what to do, or like competitors. And I think it's always important that we are not those people. We are here to help, we're here to support. And I think for me personally, the best way to prevent that from happening is to have a really good kickoff session where we sort of invite all stakeholders and people who are going to be impacted by the project, maybe even people that the client hasn't really thought are going to be impacted, but we know from experience that there's going to be someone over in that department who's definitely going to have an opinion. If everybody is on board from that, and then somebody from the client actually says, this is what we're trying to achieve, and we have asked YLD's help because they're expert in this area and they are here to help and support, then that sets us up for success in a much better way.
I couldn't agree more. That kickoff is so important. When you're coming into someone's world, stepping into someone's house, as it were.
Yeah.
And keeping that, right? Keeping that checking in consistently all the way through. Is everybody still aware of what we're doing? Are we still engaged?
Absolutely. And I think that's really important, like that, making that something that happens on a regular basis, because it's one thing to be invited to a kickoff call and then kind of 3 months in thinking, are we still doing this? Are these guys still around? Like, is that still happening? Why haven't I got an update around that? So I do think, and again, as client partners, obviously having continuous conversations, but I do think it's important that the team is sharing updates to the people that came to the kickoff, so everyone is aware that yes, while they're still around, while they're still helping, we're still having value and impact, and and that also allows them to actually come with suggestions, input, questions at any point.
We're still listening. We're still here.
It's a collaboration, right?
We've done this, and this is where we are so far. But how do you think that's going? And to your point, then maybe we get to pivot, maybe we don't. But I think the point that you made specifically about coming into a client and being a guest in their home almost, right? We're externals. Not everybody's going to know who we are, why we are, and what our values are. And I couldn't agree more. I think making that really clear at the beginning of a project and continuing to do so throughout the project will really decide if we're successful or not. I think it's so important.
Absolutely, 100%.
Wow, I think that's a perfect place to end. Thank you, Louise, for your time. This has been lovely. I look forward to many more of these.
Indeed, me too. Thank you.